and welcome to CIO News. I am Khushbu, Soni, your host for the broadcast and chief editor at CIO News. This is our exclusive interview series on the topic of secure network transformation powered by Tata Communications. It is a recorded session and will be available on our website, that is cionews.co.in, and our CIO News LinkedIn handle. It gives me an immense pleasure in introducing our guest for today. He's Mr. Gyan Pandey, Group Chief Information Officer at Aurobindo Pharmaceutical. Mr. Gyan is a seasoned technology leader with proven track record of driving and enabling business growth through digital transformation and has 25 years of rich experience in IT leadership, digital strategy, global delivery management, ERP implementation, project management, and competency management as well. He successfully managed and delivered multiple large-scale complex projects involving business transformation with lead to improvement of bottom line of the business, and has a proven track record of successfully running digital transformation projects for various organizations. And the whole objective is to actually achieve the business team's outcome across the globe. So, Mr. Gyan Pandey, it's an absolute pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Khushbu, for a kind of a great introduction. I think with the number of years gone with any individual, they will add many feathers to their cap. And over the years, all the success goes with my peers and the partners and also the team. I probably might have learned more from them. And I acknowledge that on this platform. Thank you.
Awesome. So I also have Mr. Rajarshi. He is the head pre-sales India and Mecca, that is Middle East, Central Asia and Africa from Tata Communications. Raj has 2 decades of experience in varied roles and is currently working with Tata Communications and driving their entire sales and solutions for Tata Communications' biggest region. And working with a large customer base to understand their challenges and market focus, basically. Raj, pleasure again to have you.
Thanks, Khushbu. It's a pleasure always. Thank you so much.
Awesome. So I'd like to begin, Ms. Pandey, with the first question on Aurobindo Pharma. We've all heard of the brand, but it would still be great to hear from you if you can give us a quick brief about Aurobindo.
So Aurobindo, I mean, as a organization, I think the people who we've been basically watching the pharmaceutical industry, they'll be aware. But just to give a quick introduction, we are the second largest company in the pharmaceutical in terms of revenue. And our growth has been phenomenal, maybe unparalleled in the pharmaceutical sector. And we have been kind of one of the very few companies who are fully dependent on the export market. We do not have the domestic presence. Our domestic presence is very negligible, and that too only B2B. Major revenue of the Aurobindo comes from the US market, around 60%, and around 25 to 30% in the US, and then the rest of the world. Name it any therapeutic segments, Aurobindo will have that in portfolio. Probably we are one of the most diversified in terms of the therapeutic portfolio, as well as one of the most vertically integrated pharma company in India.
Right. Great. So my next question is, as a consequence of the pandemic that we have been through and are in the situation, what long-lasting network projects that you have currently undertaking or planning to undertake, because of the changed network topology with significant user base and the customer base becoming more remote?
Very pertinent and relevant question. And before answering to this, allow me to give a little background to this, how Aurobindo's IT landscape is, and how our plants and manufacturing units are connected. So most of our, we have around 25 manufacturing plants and locations in India, mostly in Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, and one in Rajasthan. Then we have some of the sales offices also in the metro, which are connected, but that's the number of user base is very limited. Most of our enterprise applications which is centralized at the head office, that is Hyderabad.
Yeah.
And from Hyderabad, we offer those IT services not only to the India, but all the global users across the globe, US and Europe and all other countries. And we also provide the support from India, 24/7 support on the NOC and other application services and all. So keeping this in mind, our internet services are also centralized. So in pharma, generally you'll find that, okay, the internet is not available to every user. It's the need base or the requirement base. However, with this pandemic, the way we used to work, not only, I mean, entire industry or the other verticals also, and the way the users consume the services, that has completely changed.
Right.
Though we have majority of our workforce is in the let's say manufacturing plants, but still we have the sizable service departments or the common departments which will be sitting in the head office, and they are the major consumers for most of the enterprise applications and services. So that counts to around 1,000 plus people and all. But in the plants also, though operation level people will be still physically required to execute the manufacturing related operations, but still during the pandemics, there are many people who have to connect remotely because of the reasons. Either there is a lockdown, they are not well, or they do not have the access to to move to the other parts of the city. This all has posed a very big kind of challenges, and we evolved through learning from those challenges, bottlenecks, to come out with this different solutions. So basically, with this pandemic, what has come out is that, okay, anybody from anywhere with any kind of device and any services they can demand. So you'll have employees with company assets, employees with BYOD, vendors who probably will be needed for doing the support in terms of AMC or the preventive maintenance. There will be on-demand services from some third party, and that could be within India, outside India, globally, anywhere, any time zone, and that may be coming from different kind of networks and all. So to make all these things in a secured way, and the security has become the paramount, because more and more you are opening up, more and more connectivity you are giving. Ensuring your security, and especially on the network side, has become a paramount. So keeping all these things in mind, and also the underlying challenges of Aurobindo or any pharmaceutical industry, if you take that most of your manufacturing units will be in the tier 2 or tier 3 cities, where bandwidth capacity and bandwidth availability will be always a challenge. So if with this pandemic, what has happened, that the push to the digital transformation, especially on the OT side, has taken a leap, and there has been a lot of focus on to basically fast track and prioritize those projects. That means more and more consumption of your network, and also a lot of internet-based services, whether it is a cloud-based IaaS, PaaS or SaaS, that has also increased. So all these things we have basically pushed us to look entire our network design and structure, and how we are enabling the services to be consumed on those connectivity, to reposition and re-strategize that. So while capacity and the bandwidth has been a kind of a challenge which was there, which we have been working on, and we can address with this redesigning of that. But on the network security side also, we have done a lot of things. So if you have to enable a workforce on the BYD on the WFH and WFH on the company devices, there could do different solutions. And if you have to also enable, let's say, the vendors which are connecting to do the support and all, there is a different solution for that in order to assure the security. So we have gone to the granular level that, okay, the users who are getting connected to consume any of the services remotely, that it should be basically restricted to that service, to that particular device, that particular IP and that port. So a lot of granularity of the service provisioning has been brought in as a practice, and also the network management. And we also started thinking that, okay, earlier there used to be a single MPLS pipe which will enable you all your application services plus internet. Then that same pipe, there was no segmentation of the network. Let's say the traffic which is coming from the unit to the HO data center, and also from the external traffic. So we basically went ahead to redesign our whole network architecture, that to segment this traffics, end user traffic, internet-based traffics, unit to the data center traffics, then overseas user to the data center. And we have done a lot of kind of rules and policies defined. But all these things, when you are doing, you'll be adding new devices, next generation firewalls, perimeter protections, and there'll be additional devices and additional OEMs will be getting involved. And if you are doing all these things and you are not bringing the right practices and policies in terms of network management and also governance, probably will be losing the focus in terms of the security. And security will go as a kind of side by side, whether it is network or any other layer of the IT. So we also start bringing this kind of process policies and practices in terms of more collaborative SOC monitoring, and not only looking at the network, but also linking together if there is anything happens at the end user side or anything happened at the application side, DB side, OS side, network side, and then working together to resolve that. And if any incidents happens, how quickly we are identifying and recovering out of that, that also needs a lot of thought process in terms of how we can segment this whole services so as we can de-risk ourselves in case of any incident. So we have done, if I summarize this, okay, in terms of network provisioning, capacity enablement, and also in terms of segmenting and provisioning the services, we have done a lot of projects, and there is still some of the thought process going on, because there is a, I will say, a huge increase, a jump in terms of number of users consuming internet-based services or cloud-based services, because the current scenario is no more everything on-premise. You have to go kind of hybrid infrastructure, and then your network should be secure and stable, and it should be highly available, so as your services can be given. So there is we are also thinking the direction of that, okay, how we can break out internet to the internet, breaking out this internet to the cloud, so as we can have a secured pipe for those SaaS-based applications and all. That's still a kind of thought process going on, brainstorming. Maybe we'll have a little more understanding from the Tata communications and all, how to proceed on that. And on the WFS side, we have, as I said, that we have different solutions for the different types of consumers or the users. And that is mostly designed not only from the managing those services, the administering, but most also that how we can make it secure and highly available.
Great, I think wonderful insights. Raj, would love to hear your thoughts, on this.
Sure. Khushbu, thanks for that. Yeah, that was really wonderful, Mr. Pandey. And let me actually start with what we're seeing in other, large multinational pharmas, right? And I echo with almost everything that you talked about in terms of the shifts that we are seeing. The first shift that has happened in pharma companies is that more cloud adoption has happened in terms of moving workloads to cloud, whether it is a public cloud or a private cloud, depending on specific regulations / the compliances that you will have to make or address is where you choose the right kind of cloud, right? So we have seen companies moving to public clouds like AWS or Azure and private clouds like that of ours to meet those specific regulations. Then comes the interesting part that, how do you rejig your network, right? Specifically when you have some in public cloud, some in private cloud, and some maybe in your data center. So how do you rejig your entire architecture? That's a common theme across all the pharma companies. And that's where, internet is playing a much bigger role than before. Earlier it was more private networks. Today, internet is playing a much bigger role, right? But along with internet comes an issue that, internet does not have any SLAs. So how do you kind of engineer the entire thing so that, you can have a better network on internet? So we have actually helped a few companies to also deliver SLAs on internet, specifically, from point A to point B. Then comes security, right? What you rightly mentioned. And in security, there are, again, a few layers, as you rightly mentioned, in terms of how do you go granular, look at the personas in your offices or in your employees and suppliers and so on and so forth. And ensure that those personas are then given the right amount of security and access and authorization, right? And that's where a few things come into play, starting from your simple end user security to your application security, to then how do you do, you were talking about cloud proxy kind of a thing, right? How do you do cloud proxy, for example, right? And there are multiple ways to do that on the network. How do you do work from home and ensure that the user can work seamlessly while they are secure? And finally, specifically when it comes to your manufacturing locations, your warehouses, where you're doing a lot of more machines than yesterday, there, your IT/OT integration comes into play. And when IT/OT integration comes into play, then, along with the network requirement, the security requirement, and the compute requirement, also comes how the integration is going to happen seamlessly, so as to ensure that your operations is not kind of impacted in any ways. One thing, Ms. Pandey, that I didn't hear from you, I'm sure you're doing it, is on collaboration. We are seeing a surge of people looking at collaboration in a bit different way in this industry. From earlier it was more PBX, on-prem, which was not really answering to the problems which were there earlier. We are seeing a lot of people moving into Teams, for example, O365 Soup, and bringing in the entire collaboration suite there. And of course, from a security perspective, one more thing that we are seeing is SIEM, right? SIEM and SOAR, which is becoming a very common thematic against a whole lot of pharma companies at this point of time. So I absolutely echo whatever you said. And I'm sure you're doing something for collaboration, or you'll have some plans for collaboration, specifically going into either a Cisco or a Zoom or a Teams way. Many of the farmers I've seen are moving to Teams because they are typically on O365, and therefore it becomes a natural extension. So back to you, Khushbu. That's what we are also seeing in the market.
Awesome.
Just to the point to the Rajarshi, that yes, we have been thinking to move to the Office 365. It all started in the 2020 December, and we could board hardly 100 people, and out of that, most of the people were in the IT only. But when the March 25th, this lockdown got announced, and we boarded around 1,500 people in the next 1 week time, and the surge was kind of so high, and we were also not very equipped, and the people in the pharma, especially manufacturing, who are not used to work remotely and who are not used to get adopted to this kind of collaboration platform. So the one was the provisioning, and second was training them, and third was that, okay, making sure that, okay, we are still not getting compromised on the security side. Now, not only as any organizations, the digital collaboration and this has become the integral part. Just like you cannot survive from the internet, you cannot survive without this kind of one or other kind of collaborations. We have Office 365 as well as Zoom also, WebEx also. It's a combination of all three. And our day starts just before we reach to the office, and it all starts on these kind of video calls and all. And our top leadership team, this has become, I will say that with this enablement of collaborations, and also enabling that from the infrastructure aspect at the different locations, it has become far more easier to know about the operations in a faster and efficient way and manage these things. It has basically helped and enhanced the efficiency and the performance of the business.
Absolutely, yeah.
True. Very true. I think a lot of points for us to discuss on. So my next question is actually also around what Mr. Pandey mentioned, that there has been a growth from the tier 2 and the tier 3 cities, and as a consequence of workforce moving to these cities, in such locations, do you feel the need to augment the network connectivity there, Mr. Pandey?
So for us, it is not something that because of pandemic it has happened. For any of the manufacturing sector or the pharma, this challenge was already there. Okay. But this challenge was more from the aspect of capacity and availability. That most of our plants are in the tier 3 cities or tier 2 cities.
Right.
So getting a right kind of bandwidth in terms of MPLS or whether in terms of ILL, there is a limitations.
Right.
And what has happened with this is that we also need to ensure the availability, high performing and rapid expansion of the demand in terms of the bandwidth, which definitely has a dependency on the infrastructure of the service providers. So it will not basically ramp up quickly. So we have to look into the combination of these things. For example, how we have addressed that, okay, to ensure that 100% availability of the network when it's connected to the head office. That earlier we used to have a primary MPLS connectivity with service provider A, and there will be a secondary which will be service provider B. And we will be using service provider B as and when the primary is down. And earlier, because entire India, a lot of infrastructure work will be going on, whether it is roads, bridges, some digging will happen here and there. Fiber cut will happen, or the tower where the RF devices are being mounted, that will not be working properly. So these challenges have always been there, and this impacts if the plants are running 24/7, consuming some of the applications and services which is needed to for the process manufacturing on the OT side. And we have been basically, before pandemic also, we have been working to make this availability 100%. But when the pandemics, what has happened that, okay, we have to also ensure, because now the users are also far more equipped in terms of the digital orientation or IT orientation. So if some application is running slow, they will do the ping test and they will say your latency is now 200 ms. IT should or network team should look into this. So in that way, what has happened is that we enabled primary, we also enabled secondary, and we also work on the tertiary, which is third service provider. And then we also work on the SD-WAN service. So SD-WAN services on the either tertiary link, or as long as your 4G connectivity is there on a dongle, also critical users and critical services can be enabled.
Right.
So we ensure that in any case, 100% 24/7 uptime for all the critical applications and critical users will be there. Secondly, we have been working with the different service provider, because if there is a constraint for a service provider A in certain locations, we will be making the service provider B as our primary connectivity.
Right.
But I still feel that in this scenario, there is still a lot of things depends on the service providers infrastructure and their capacity enablement. For example, I will give a typical example which we feel maybe Rajarshi from the service provider side, they can think about is that we have the availability of the internet on demand, that is on the ILL side. So you have an elastic bandwidth, so as and when you demand. So if the Flipkart is going $1 billion sale or Diwali Dhamaka sale or Amazon, you have that flexibility. But in case of MPLS, it's a assured fixed pipe. You cannot have the flexible or the elastic. That is what I do. I may not be knowing the offerings from the other service provider. Or if we go for that, probably commercially it is not that lucrative to go for that. So from the service provider side, we need to have that kind of flexibility. That on the MPLS side also we should have this elastic offering. Number one. Number two, there is a constant shift is happening, that applications and the services which we have been consuming on premise, more and more hybrid infrastructure people are moving in, and this migration from on premise to the cloud will happen more southward. I mean more forward. So that means your demand for ILL will increase.
Yeah.
And then in that case, probably we will be able to extend the benefit of this elastic bandwidth. But I think next 1 or 2 years, still this migration process will be there for most of the companies. So if there is an elastic bandwidth for MPLS also, this will help. And generally what happens that during the month end, there will be in pharmaceutical manufacturing, there will be huge load on the network, because your quality team, secure team, your operations team, they will be downloading, uploading multiple PDF files, and those are basically scanned copies and all, which are pretty heavy to the network. So that kind of flexibility is needed. That is one thing. And second thing is that, yes, we constantly need to revisit the bandwidth sizing, keep on working with this your partners to get more bandwidth and enhance them, and have different solutions. And then make the different service providers or the different connectivity as the primary, not a single line as the primary for all the services. Maybe my email services or my let's say DMS services or ERP services on the service link A, and service link B could be for the QMS links and others. This is what we have done so far. But yes, in the tier 2, tier 3 cities, the capacity availability added to that security, that still needs a lot of things to be done, and it cannot be only from the customer side. I believe that customer service provider and maybe some support from the regulatory side, TRI and all, and government all together can. Yes.
Raj, would love to know your thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, yes. Again, brilliant inputs, Mr. Pandey, and I totally echo with what you're saying. In specifically, network or what is delivered to any premise will depend on what is the infra behind it, right? And then typically in a tier 3 city, the infra may not be that good, but in a tier 2 city, typically that is better. At the end of the day, specifically since as a service provider, we are seeing a huge shift to internet. More and more, focus is going there in terms of, what else can happen in internet. And MPLS as a service is really not, I'll not say it's not the future. There is a huge future for MPLS also, but then, the amount of traffic which will be there on the public network and therefore internet will keep growing, right? And if I look at some statistics out here, what typically happens is that when an application is ported to internet, the amount of bandwidth used by the user typically goes up by 200%, if not more. I'm sure if you're using O365 now, you're going through that, your bandwidth will have increased not less than 200%, right? Maybe it has gone up more. That's the typical way it happens. Now, with that as a background, there are a few things which needs to be done, right? You've correctly mentioned SD-WAN is one way, but in SD-WAN also there are specific things that you can do. For example, you said that depending on the day of the month or time of the day, there are users or personas which need specific queues in the network, right? Those kind of things can be done on SD-WAN. We've actually done those kind of use cases based on time of day or day of the month, where on 15th of every month or 30th of every month, the accounting people need to upload a few things and they need to be up in the queue, for example, right? So those kind of things can be done so that your critical functions in that period can actually get a higher queue rate per se. The second thing is, when you talked about burstable, right? Burstable is something which is there in internet, as you rightly mentioned. It is also there in layer 2 services, specifically in Ethernet. So, in Ethernet, you can actually get burstable services similar to that of internet, as you mentioned. And if your number of locations is less than 25, Ethernet becomes a good option in terms of looking at a multi-point Ethernet architecture, which will then connect all your offices. Because then what you can do is you can actually have more security, because layer 2 is more secure than layer 3, right? I'm sure you'll be in agreement with me on that. So along with giving more security, you can actually do a LAN transfer between two locations and have a burstable bandwidth. Now that is again one of the things that we are seeing. However, that layer 2 network is more limited to higher bandwidth locations is what we are seeing for our enterprise customers, specifically the say R&D centers. You have some R&D centers, you want to connect them where you need burstable bandwidth, those can come in there. It doesn't really make sense in the manufacturing units or the sales office, because the bandwidth requirement is very low, right? Maybe it is in the range, sub 10 range, right? And in a sub 10 range, going for Ethernet may or may not make sense at the end of the day, because you need to also do SD-WAN on top of that, right? So looking at all those things, the new network of tomorrow, which applications will go on private, which applications will go on internet, how the whole thing will be done, and specifically how SD-WAN is configured, how you've done the daisy chaining on top of that is what we are seeing in a lot of enterprises at this point of time.
Absolutely right, Rajarshi. I think what basically we have been also experiencing, and we also visualize that the more and more this OT adoption in terms of digital transformation happening, the traffic will go more on the ILL base, because we'll be consuming more cloud-based services, whether it is IaaS or PaaS or SaaS. In fact, we also, if I take 5 years back or 4 years back, there was not a single SaaS application. But we have at least now 1 dozen of SaaS applications, and those number of users is not 100 or 200, it goes in thousands. And we have some of the applications which is in the pipeline to migrate it to the SaaS. So everything is moving towards that, and this hybrid setup will still continue. There is still dependency of some of the solutions in terms of equipments or the tools, which is specific to the pharma manufacturing, and that has also dependency on the compliances that may take little time. Like how it happens in the BFSI, that okay, your ATM machine still were running on the XP, where all other things move to the digital in terms of customer facing. The pharma is also in the same journey. It will take time that yes, that migration happen. Good to know about this layer 2 burstable these things, but yes, one thing which is there, that you need to have the right capacity to in order to have this, so as you can make it commercially viable things in this. Okay.
Great, wonderful. There's Ms. Pandey, you mentioned a lot about the innovation that you've gotten, and the roadmap as well. Also, if you can talk about from an overall perspective of for the continuity of the services and the changing business requirements, how is Aurobindo Pharma adopting this innovation, both from business and the technology side?
I will say that this is a very, very relevant question, and innovation is something which take it any field, whether it is IT, whether it is operations, whether it is marketing, finance, service provider, consumer. Innovation is one thing which will be ensuring that your path of success in the long term. If you stop innovating, you are defining your dead end sooner or later. So we are not exception to that. And within IT also, the way we operate, the way we manage, the way we provision, deprovision, the way we work with our partners, the way we basically interact with our users or the business, and the way we enable, all these things needs a lot of innovations. And that doesn't mean that in every area we'll be doing innovation. But yes, in some of the things which we have been one of the early adopters, maybe in the vertical, in 2016, we started the journey of going on the SD-WAN. We went ahead with some service provider, and then we thought that, okay, so if SD-WAN can be done by the service provider, and that was still an early thought in the industry, Rajarshi will agree to me, at least in India, we developed our own in-house SD-WAN solutions. And as a pilot, we started running and connecting to as a secondary link for our overseas, because global MPLS was too costly. So can we start on this SD-WAN on the our global overseas offices? Then we did a lot of I will say that improvements to that. And now this SD-WAN, all our overseas are connected on our own in-house SD-WAN as a primary link. And our units also are connected on the SD-WAN. But we need to take this a step further. And for that, we need to look for the partners who have done far more R&D and innovations in that. Because doing innovation in certain areas, also it has limitations. You can't do innovations in all the areas because your resources, your skills, your experience is limited. And at times it doesn't make any business sense also that we as a pharma company do innovations in the network kind of things. So wherever it is needed, when this was not there in the ecosystem, we probably have gone at it itself. Taking next step forward, probably you have to go with these people who are already pioneered in that, or who have, I will say that far more brighter roadmap in that these things, like Tata Communications in this case, for example. We need to partner with them. Second thing, I will say that the great change which has happened in terms of innovation is that we need to accept and realize one thing, that IT is no more a department of function. IT is the DNA of every user and every individual. There is a bit of IT in you, in me, the kid who is doing the remote classes. even the person who is not literate, but he is digitally empowered to do transactions on his smart this mobile, and he is very well. If he is not able to type the things, he is giving the Google voice command to get the things what he want to consume from the internet. Right. So we need to understand that this IT is becoming a kind of a part of the daily activities DNA.
Yeah.
And with that, the demand and the expectation of the users, because the users always late, what they get on the consumer side. So my look and feel of this Facebook is like this, or Google is like this. I get these things immediately based on the AI engine, social media, whatever they're using. So they become more demanding. And we all know that millennials, when they come, they have the expectation that the way they get in their personal digital outset, the enterprise should not offer anything less than that. It could be more than that. So this can be achieved only through doing innovations. However, the innovations within organization of a given IT function that has limitations, innovation has to be looked in a collaborative manner, so as we can reap the benefit and leverage a lot of good things done by the partners and implement the things within organization. Yes.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. Wonderful insights. Considering the time, I have one last question for you both. If you can share certain best practices, do's and don'ts for our viewers, that'd be great. So we can start with Mr. Pandey and then Rajmund, if you want to take it up.
Well, I think do's and don'ts, maybe Rajarshi can add more, but what I come with our experience, and I will keep this more from the network IT side. I will say that, okay, whenever there is always a business will always start with a very minimal and simple demand. And once they start the journey, it always get expanded, and then there'll be many things which will come as a surprise. So one of the don'ts, I will say that, okay, just don't jump on and enable the business when the first request for the internet has come. You need to go and ask few more questions to the extent possible they have the information, and keep that exercise a constant practice, so as you can be prepared to enable those services in a manner so as business will not get impacted, because a lot of unrest and dissatisfaction happens with the reason where IT is not the culprit, and neither the business is the culprit. Business needs those services. Right. But because this collaboration and the planning didn't happen, so you end up that you have 1,000 users who needs to be enabled over 24 hours. IT will say that this requirement was never given to me, and I cannot talk to my service provider Tata Communications to ramp up my bandwidth of the MPLS from 10 Mbps to the 100 Mbps. They need time. They will say that I need to upgrade my infrastructure. For that, I need the CapEx approval. There are so many formalities and all these things will happen. So when there is a requirement, be clear and try to ask more questions to the business, how it will grow in the future. Sometimes business also will not have clarity. Second is that, okay, it's always better to start with the people who are best in that area rather than reinventing the wheel internally. It's not a matter of ego or pride, because that's the waste of energy and effort. Probably focus that on the areas where you do not have solutions, because every enterprise will have some specific challenges which will be unique in that nature. So put your energy there. Third thing is that, okay, the way you manage the network earlier and with this post-pandemic scenarios, it has completely changed. You don't have to look network as a only network. You need to be more collaborative within IT space and your partner space, so as in terms of provisioning, deprovisioning, troubleshooting, but also in case of any incidents, you can recover fast. And third thing is that, okay, whatever we are going to adopt as a solution, you look at not only the existing landscape, but also look what is the future landscape going to be, depending on the technology, your business expansion, and your IT digitalization roadmap, and strategize that journey based on that platform or technology. So as your investment, what you are making today, that will have a long-term value. And second, you don't have to switch over a technology, because when you are switching over, there is a lot of dependency, skill set gap, right partner, again, investment, going back to the business, asking for your budget approval and all, that doesn't sound good. So make your case and adoption of technology very clear, which will be aligned to the information what you have in terms of your business growth, in terms of your technology roadmap, so as you don't have to switch over. So here underlying thing is that always make not only the informed decisions, but strategic decisions to make the future enabled. And one more thing which I will add, which and it's not only just technology. We also have to keep in mind that okay, the investment which you are putting in, that has the right return. So budget part we cannot ignore. So when we go and task for the business, they only focus that how much we're spending. So if that is spent, it should have the right return, whether in terms of the service availability, user comfort, extra businesses and all. You should be very clear on that. And if you are not aware, there is nothing wrong asking your partner to help out on this, so as you can strategize that in a proper way. And anything which you are implementing, go live or enablement is not end of the story. It's just the beginning. Ensure and handhold your users and business to make a right adoption and try to exploit as much as possible. So as this investment gets more adoption. Many of the technology initiatives, including network. For example, if you have enabled people on the bandwidth broadband link to their home in order to work. If they're not using it, it's a sheer waste of money. Or if they are using it, what are the challenges they're facing? We have to constantly keep on some kind of feedback mechanism and also educating them. If somebody is not using, there is no point of enabling it. Have a conversation with them, either provision, deprovision, reduce it, so as you can optimize the cost. The cost factor also have to be kept in sensitivity.
Great. Raj, over to you.
Sure, thanks. Mr. Pandey, I totally echo with all the points that you said. And this is exactly, what I would also put in do's and don'ts. So, the first point that Mr. Pandey talked about, Khushbu, is basically that don't solve for a part of the value chain, look at the entire value chain. What we see in some enterprises where things go wrong is because they look at one part of the value chain and try to solve for it. And then going forward, it doesn't come together, right? And there is a mismatch, there's a gap, and then business comes back and says, this is not working, that's not working, process is not there, blah, blah, blah. So, when you strategize, when you put the blueprint, you have to think about the entire value chain. Then you may want to deploy one thing at a time, right? Depending on the budget that you have, manpower that you have, etc., etc. But do not think for only one part, because that is not going to give you success. That's the first thing. Deploying one thing at a point of time is also, we need to ensure that the future roadmap, as Mr. Pandey was saying, in terms of, what's the future out there? And when I'm deploying this, what's going to happen 2-3 years down the line? Nobody can think really at this point of time, 5 years down the line, because, tech landscape is changing extremely fast at this point of time. If you look at, security itself, the landscape is changing every 6, 8, 9 months, right? So, you can't really think 5 years, but 2-3 years down the line, you should think about. Next, I'd say a very interesting thing that one should be doing, which people don't really do that much, is talk to your partners, right? And here is where we do a lot of tech workshops with our customers, because what we bring to the table is what are we doing with other people in the industry, and therefore what are they looking at, and then also talk to your peers. I'm sure Mr. Pandey does both of them. So, that's a big tool, because, if you do that, you'll know what's happening next, because, you yourself will never be able to understand and fathom, whatever is happening in the world. So when you're talking to, experts who are doing it for other customers, people in the industry, and then you're talking to your peers, which are the other CIOs, a lot of new ideas come in, right? And that is also birth to innovation, because, they may say that, hey, I did this and this is what has happened. In your company, it may have a different flavor of the same thing. And that's where, we may say, hey, let's try this out. Let's see what happens, right? And the third thing is, again, very correctly, as Mr. Pandey said, adoption, right? A lot of times, we do a huge new deployment and forget about adoption. If you do not focus on adoption, the entire tech landscape that you have built and the money that you have put, the effort that you put, is all going to go waste. Adoption is something which should be a focus, and then building on top of that, that in terms of what else can come in, what do you get, what's in it for me, for the user, should be defined properly. So if we focus on these three things, success for the IT organization and the partnership always is success. That I can guarantee.
If Khushbu, if you can allow me to just to add,
yes, absolutely.
Talking to the peers and partners, and Rajarshi, I think you will also agree to the one thing. Just to extending to that point, I will add in with that. What happens is that when people talk with the peers, and most of the times the peers' response will be based on how personal rapport you carry with them. That means how transparent and open are. Of course, it will have a bearing on their organization part also, that how much they should basically sharing and all. But your personal rapport will ensure that, okay, how transparent they will be. But one thing which we have to be sensitive, that the inputs what we take from the peers, and even if you are very well connected with them, and also from the partners, because partners also gather a lot of knowledge from the different challenges coming from the same vertical industry. These will always have some subjective element. When I say a subjective element, that I have started implementing a technology, maybe on the Cisco, and the project failed. And if the project failed, generally what happens is that this is not a good solution. This is not a right implementer, or they just basically bluff, this feature is not there. Please don't go by that. You take those inputs with humbleness and all, and do your objective evaluations. Most of the times, project fails not because of the partner or the technology. It's all internal. And if it is an implementer, take the lesson that, okay, you should have the right partner for it. If it is a requirement, you ensure and revalidate and revisit your requirements and reconfirm with this OEM that, okay, whether this feature can be done. Probably you can also see that whether it is relevant for me or not. Your requirements critical to you, that should be met. And then be open and kind of things to understand what the other challenges are there. So that is one thing which I wanted.
Great. I think these have been very candid responses and some great insights for our viewers. I'm sure there is lot of key takeaways for them. So I would like to thank you, Mr. Pandey and Raj, for joining us today and taking out this time for this session. So thank you so much, and it was a pleasure to have you.
Thanks, Khushbu. Always a pleasure. Thanks, Mr. Pandey.
Thanks.